So the way I think this would be useful to do is I'm just going to go through some of the core like terminology and concepts, and you may already know some of this stuff, so apologies if you do. And then like feel free to just tell me like, hey, I don't get that, and we can talk about it more.
Okay, right on.
First thing to talk about, I think there's about 15 slides in this, so again, stop me anytime. So automations versus vibe coding. You just mentioned Open Clww. So Open Clww falls very much into this like automation category. And there are some other tools that exist today, like for example, Claude's Cowork, which allows you to automate essentially like workflows that you do repeatedly. And I kind of put that as separate from vibe coding, although it's like, they're similar. Open Clww less so, like that is the thing going and vibe coding on your behalf. So yeah, up front, just calling out that there's these two areas that are like blowing up. I think they share a lot of parallels, but they are slightly different.
Okay.
Markdown is a term that you'll hear a lot, and Markdown refers to essentially the language of a computer, and it's in written language that we understand, but as you'll see later on, I talk about this idea of a PRD, which I'll explain what that is, but you'll create those things in Markdown language such that the computer can read it. And again, like when I say you'll make it in Markdown, you'll tell the like OpenAI or whatever model you're using to write these things for you. You won't have to learn the language itself. It's just good to know that a Markdown file is like a useful format of a document for the vibe coding tools to read.
Okay.
So tokens, there's a lot of essentially all of these models use tokens, and the way tokens are broken down is it's typically by kind of like words and punctuation and phrases. And so the cost of a model will be based on its token usage. And it's just good to know that like the way tokens are determined is it like kind of chunks both the input and the output of what you're putting into these models into different chunks. And it's not like distinctly exactly a word always, like sometimes it breaks it down differently, but by and large, if you want just like a simple rule, it's like one word, one token is like a good like basic kind of concept to have in mind.
Okay, and are these the same tokens that you pay for?
Correct, yeah. So that comes to my next slide here, which is, and this was supposed to be around price. So obviously today, the prices of these models just determines how many tokens you have access to. And the more, essentially the better models at doing the extensive vibe coding tend to cost more. So currently the most expensive model out there is the Claude models. And so they burn through tokens very quickly, but they're also the best at doing the vibe coding tasks. Yeah. And so
that's what we're using at work. That's what everybody's making the move to.
And it's cool because at work, obviously you got these enterprise accounts, so you can just like go ham. I also personally subscribe to Claude Ultra. And here's my logic for that. It's like, I remember very early on in my career, like someone told me never be able to blame your tools for like why the output isn't good enough. And
yeah, that's good.
If you think about like what this essentially gives you, it's like an engineer would cost you, $500,000 a year in salary plus equity and all the rest of it, and they only work from 9 till 5, whereas this will just work for you non-stop if you want it to. And it has the capability of like the fastest, best engineer there is. So for $2,400 or however much I pay a year for this, like my productivity is just going to skyrocket, and I'll be able to achieve so much more. And so that's how I kind of justify the cost.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. And is there a difference in like, do you use your personal account for work stuff?
I don't personally, because I'm kind of I'm building tools on the side and stuff like that. Anything we're doing on the work computer would technically be owned by Block, right? So, and it's nice because like I'm learning that's helping my work, even though I have like a separate whole thing going on the side where I'm building my own stuff. Yeah, I just think like even obviously if you can go through the learning curve doing only work related tasks, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to just continue to use your work computer. Like sometimes there'll be things that I want to investigate inside the realm of vibe coding, and the thing that I'm being asked to do at work isn't like, it's not going to stretch me to the degree that I could learn by, setting myself my own personal goal. So I'll, do what I need to do on work. I'll use vibe coding tools when I can, but then I can always be like stretching myself and learning by setting myself different jobs to do on the side. And in terms of like things to build, maybe we'll come around to that at the end, but like scratching your own itch for things that you do on a daily basis is a great place to start. And I'll talk more about that in a moment because I think there's things worth digging into there. So next thing to know is about a context window. So essentially what a context window is just in terms of those tokens, it's like how much of the back history of a conversation can this model remember before it needs to reset its memory. And this is obviously useful for if you're doing an extensive task, you need it to know what you had previously. And so I think a model recently came out with like a 1 million token context window, and that would be fantastic. Wow. For example, for like dropping a whole code base into the model and being like, hey, of an already established product, and being like, get to understand this whole code base, because then I'm going to start asking you additional questions on it.
Yeah. One
thing to know about context windows, however, is that when you're vibe coding, there will often be an indicator in the UI which indicates how much of the context window you've filled up. And as you start to stretch the limits of those context windows, it's having to search through all of that back history every time it performs a new action, so it can sometimes get confused.
Right.
So it's kind of good practice to... It's obviously beneficial to use the context window, but once you get to a place, refresh it, because you want it to come at it afresh without having all of that back history bogging it down. So a good way to look at that is to think about it in task based. So it's okay, I've performed a certain task that I wanted it to do. I'll refresh the context window because I'm going to start on another branch of a task.
That makes sense.
Inference. So what inference is much more complicated than how I'm going to articulate it, but essentially it's speed. And so what you have today is you have say Opus 4.6 is a very capable coding model, but it does more extensive thinking. And so if what you're asking of it is just a very simple task, you don't need all of that compute power to achieve the result you're after. So they've recently released Haiku 4.5, which is still a very competent model, but its inference is super fast.
Mm-hmm.
So an example of that is I'd sell stuff on eBay for a side hobby. When I'm taking pictures of the products, I have it set up so that it does a search for me and comes back with the titling and a description and some information about the product. I don't need it to go and spend 10 minutes looking through the internet and coming up with the best title ever. I just need very quick responses that are, aren't going to slow down my workflow. So in that case, I would use a model with strong, better inference or better speed.
Okay, inference is speed. I heard the term used a bit, but I hadn't attached to it that it was that.
Yeah, and I mean, if you type it in, there's a much more complicated explanation for it. I'm kind of giving you the dummy's guide, you know, and
Yeah, I
that,
think it
that's
was
where
like
I'm
in
at.
a conversation about training models, like when not models need more inference to like the bigger they get when they're as they're like building the new ones or something. So that makes sense.
Right. So yeah, in terms of the models, obviously there's all these different models, and everything I've just explained to you is largely what makes a given model better than another one. So right now, and obviously this is such a moving target, but the Claude models are the superior for coding largely. OpenAI is not far behind, and in terms of token usage, it's actually significantly cheaper. Gemini has its version, and it's been really competent around like image generation with Nano Banana and things like that. So you kind of have to like know what a model's given strength is. Like Grok I think is also has a lot of X data. So if you're looking for like to the minute like current responses, like leverage that tool. And so I'm butchering this and simplifying a lot, but like essentially like all of these models have slightly different strengths, and with usage you'll start to like learn, okay, this is good for this task. Because I've been doing coding, like largely I just use Claude for most things right now. And so yeah, that's what that's about. Okay, now we get into some other like funny ones. So API, which is an application programming interface, sounds super complicated, but the way I would describe this is it's kind of like being able to apply a filter to what it is you're trying to achieve, leveraging the powers of another tool. So that was wordy, but let me use an example. Like, let's say I'm trying to create something, but I want to be able to have ChatGPT interpret what I've written and like make it generate a certain response that I'm trying to achieve. Well, what I would do is I would tap into OpenAI's API and I would plug it into my product via an API key, which is just a series of digits that you can just easily get from the back end of these tools.
Yeah. And I'm familiar with the API from like the business side, not how to do them but conceptually.
Got it. Okay, so in that case, then we won't belabor this one. But
do you like for when you're doing your personal stuff, do you use an API?
So I'll give you an example. Like right now, we've been doing a lot of voice work with kiosks at work, and so we're leveraging 11 Labs, which is they have built a whole model which is really good at interpreting human voice and an agent that can communicate with you. And none of these AI models have a stronger like fundamental basis in that interaction model than 11 Labs. So we're building the interface, but then we'll use 11 Labs' API as like how it communicates between the device and the person. And so, yeah, I mean, the one thing to be aware of with APIs is like if you're building a product, every time you call the API, there is costs involved. So you need to be aware that like you need to charge more for this thing that you're building if it's requiring an API key to give a response, because you're going to have to subsidize the cost of the API like in your product.
Right.
APIs are incredibly powerful and it's super useful. Like let's say I wanted to build a tool around like my eBay store. I would obviously plug into eBay's API as a way to like filter data around what I'm doing or whatever. Like there's just a million different use cases and there are hundreds of thousands of APIs. Or I'm not sure how many there are exactly, but there's loads. And they all offer different things. This is another expression that is like come around a lot lately, especially for me because I'm using Figma. But an MCP server is very similar in some respects to an API at least from a novice perspective, because you connect your product to the MCP server, and it allows it to perform a given task that the MCP allows. So, for example, in my case, if I'm using Claude Code and I want to export something I've coded to Figma, I attach the MCP server link to Claude Code, and then it facilitates that function to happen. So very similar, I think, to an API in some respects. But I'm sure there's a whole more complicated reason as to why these two are very different things. But by and large, they unlock a power by connecting them to whatever it is you're building. Okay.
So if how would that, where, at what point in you may have mentioned this, if there was a map, what point in the process is this with the APIs, somebody else's?
So I think
a type of database that you would API into, or service that you would API into.
Yeah. So this, in terms of service, is just there is anything that you could possibly think of that would integrate into a product is probably doing so via an API. So if you're using payments, or if you're say using AI in your product, you're probably getting plugging that AI into the product through an API key.
Right. And where is this in that process? Or this?
The MCP.
Yeah.
So the way, and I think I'll answer this in a minute with another step, but I would not even think about these things in terms of things that you need to set up, because the way you're going to prompt whatever it is you're going to build, it is going to feed these you need to integrate this tool into your product. It will tell you. And so I think a lot of the anxiety around these things is I need to know when to do this, when to do that. But these models are so competent at being you need to get the MCP server key for me from this tool, or I need you to get the API key from OpenAI in order to allow me to do that thing you want it to do. And so when it prompts you to get those things, you go in search of them. It's just the only reason I've even brought it up in a way is just so that you know what these things are. But over and over again, and there's so much things I haven't touched on through these slides where it will say okay, you need to go sign up for GitHub, or you need to download Superbase and set up a server on Superbase. And basically, it knows better than you what the architecture is, and so all you're going to do is just follow step by step what it's telling you to do.
Cool.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so now we get on to different ways to code. So there are 3 primary ways that you can vibe code today, at least that I'm aware of. There is a CLI, or a command line interface, and this is essentially Cursor. It's any tool that allows you to both talk to it and see the code being performed at the same time. And Cursor is a very powerful tool because you can switch between the different models. It's essentially just a user interface for a terminal. Then you have terminal interfaces, which is what Claude Code is, which is there is no UI. It's just you're just talking directly to the terminal, and it's kind of steering you as you go. Now, the difference between those two is a CLI is a little bit more user-friendly for people that aren't used to terminals. So for non-engineers, a CLI, because you can speak to it in just normal English, is probably what you like or are more inclined to like. Whereas the benefit of a terminal is that there are all these different keypad shortcuts you can perform, where if you're familiar with terminals and you can do like slash commands and things like that, you can like it can like level you up. The thing I would say is like when you're starting out, definitely stay in a CLI, just like get to grips with like the back and forth, and then dabble with a terminal interface just to like have a play and see what it feels like. Like you may gravitate towards it, but generally for people starting out, like they're not using the terminal interface really.
Okay. So are slash commands like pre-written in sequence instructions or bits of code, or?
So there are pre-written ones that it already has kind of in its system, and then you can also set up ones that you want. So like kind of using them as like keypad shortcuts to perform actions that you may want it to do.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. It was like I was just going to say it's a bit more of like a power user feature that engineers might use.
Okay. And would an application be like, if they had some whole section of code, now I don't know how big the slash commands could be from a capacity perspective, but like, would an application be, I have this big set of code for this part of our product and we do a lot of work on it, and instead of going in and replacing parts of that, I like put this command, I like use a slash command and then have it do this other new stuff that I want. And I'm always keeping like fresh iterations or maybe one version of it.
Right.
But they do work on that part a lot.
So once you start like getting into, and I'll be honest, I'm not even here yet. Once you start getting into like the higher levels of this, you can essentially like break out multiple chains of I think they're called branches or trees of a code base. So you can have like one agent performing actions on a part of the code base here, and then you might have 3 other instances working on different facets to it. Like right now, I'm just like, providing a command, it's going away and doing it, and then I'm providing the next one, or maybe I'm queuing them up. But like high level workflow is you have multiple of these things going simultaneously. Preferably they're autonomous, because you've like a lot of the times right now when you perform actions, it requires you to like confirm an action, and you kind of sit there confirming yes, so I'm okay with you doing that. There are some commands you can provide to like just make it go and do its own thing, and there's a lot of risk inherent in that. But yeah, to your point, like you might make a slash command that is like a debugging slash command. So you like, rather than be like, oh, that thing you just built, it doesn't quite work how I want. Like you pre-configure a slash command with like a list of instructions of like how you want that thing to perform. And it might be slash bug, and then it goes away and does like an extensive debugging for you. So essentially that is just really helpful for knowing, or for being able to perform like sizable actions in very quick amount of keystrokes. But I'm stressing highly, this definitely falls into like power user features.
I'll have a conceptual awareness when I'm having a conversation with. One of the things that I'm so glad that you're like taking me through like this is that I want to be able to like have some of the awareness and to swim in conversations at work with groups that are like, the technology team using it.
Right.
And even just like understanding what they're saying and having the mental map for it.
Yeah. And, I put myself firmly in the intermediate, so I'm sure they can level you up even further. But like, this is all the stuff that I've learned organically over, I'd say, the last 6 months that has been really helpful for me to just understand it.
Cool.
The last thing I would say is, or the last thing to point out, is that Claude actually has Claude Code on a desktop app where you can talk to it just like ChatGPT. So it's like the most user-friendly interface, honestly.
Would that be the bot app that I downloaded when I was logging into the account for the first time?
Yeah, and at the top it's like chat, co-work, and code. Chat is ChatGPT, like, it's chatting with it. Co-work is you setting up automations for your workflows that you want it to achieve. and you can like provide additional information so that it does it how you want it to. Again, that was what I mentioned at the very beginning. And then code is vibe coding, but they've made it like so user friendly because it's just a very similar interface to how you would chat in the standard kind of chat models.
Okay.
So in the future, or where this is going, and again, like what do I know, but like things which I think for sure are going to happen are, right now there's like the human is in the loop, and they're not always like very competent engineers can use things like Open Clww to remove the human component, but the user, like I downloaded Open Clww, and as a non-developer, like there was loads of bugs and like things I had to figure out to get it to work.
Okay.
It's going to become much more user friendly as they iterate and improve upon these things, and eventually there'll be like an out the box solution that allows you to perform like Open Clww like heavily automated workflows, but just in a much more simple way. So yeah, it's incredible what it can do, and it's definitely like having a autonomous worker that like works on your behalf. But getting it set up and performing how you want it to today is not user friendly and pretty cumbersome in my opinion. Whereas I think that's going to change very quickly. OpenAI have just acquired them. OpenAI does a fantastic job with its user interfaces, and so I anticipate within the next 6 months you'll have Open Clww-like capabilities in a very simple form factor.
Yeah. And
then the last thing is real world models. So, I mean, this is maybe getting into like sci-fi territory a little bit, but I think it's, again, just around the corner, which is, you think about like, say, Google Maps, which is just all data of the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And then you layer in like AI's capability to be able to like simulate scenarios in fake environments that don't exist, and the speed at which it can do that. If you're layering that over like data which mimics the real world, I think like we talk about robotics today, and there's a lot of mockery around like how simple these things are, and obviously I'm not a roboticist or whatever the expression is, so I don't know for sure. But I'm pretty sure that this thing is going to like have an exponential curve where once we overlay AI with real world environments and very quick repeatable learning loops through simulated data scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
like this is going to break out of the computer and it will be in the real world, as in like you'll be able to code things through whether it's robots or just like real world environments that will it's just inevitable that it's just going to explode in like outside of just software and into the real world in the coming years, in my opinion. So anyway, that's just,
yeah, I think it happened fast.
It's speculation, but that's what I would say. Okay, so now we get into like how you can actually. I got a 10-minute warning on my my free Zoom call, so this is good. There's only 2 more slides, I think. So a PRD, you may be familiar with this already, but a product requirements document essentially outlines everything that you want a given product to do. And so, like when you're starting out, like most people would go into the chat window and they'll just start telling it what they want it to do, but it's like very limited in its scope. Whereas I would encourage everybody to take a step back, think about what they want to build holistically, put that into a PRD, and then in a markdown file, which is essentially just a Word document, and then have the AI read your PRD and then make its own mind up around how it should action it. So I think I share my workflow. Oh yeah, so the crux of that is because you didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. So you were asking earlier, like, when do I put the MCP server in, or when do I do this? Just like you don't know any of that. You're not you're not building this, but the machine is a super intelligence, so it knows. So don't try and describe to it what you want it to do. articulate an outcome, and then follow its advice. And that's what the PRD does a very good job of, is it's like, I want to build this thing to perform this action. This is what I'm thinking. Like, you can kind of give it some guardrails, but then let it go off and do its thing, because it knows more than you do. Okay, so this is the last slide, but this is just my current workflow. So what I do is, and again, there'll be people that will say better, like there's better ways of doing this, but I'll go into one of these tools and I'll open up the microphone and I'll just blurt out in very simple language what I want this thing to build for me. And, you know, with all the ums and ahs and whatever, it doesn't really matter. And then the second step is I'll say, hey, from what I just said, like before I press enter, I'll put in can you take this and turn it into like a better prompt for, I want to turn this into a PRD. Can you make this into a prompt that will create an output for a PRD? It cleans it up and kind of explains what I want it to achieve. And then I run it to create the PRD. So there's like a 2-step, like in the chat model, like part where I go super janky like language through to like something that's very clear and correct. And the only time in this whole process where I like give it half an hour to like read through exactly what it said is when it creates the PRD. Is I'll read it from top to bottom and make sure that it's doing what I want it to do, because that's essentially going to be the source of truth for what it builds. Then I'll go into these models and I'll have it, and I'll just put the PRD in and it will just run with it. And then whatever it's telling me to do, set up this, plug in this, whatever, I follow everything it tells me to do. I can say to it at any point, hey, I want to see what this looks like, and it will go like guide me to set up the things that allows me to like view the prototype on my phone. And there's lots of different ways you can do that, but just follow it step by step. And what you end up with is a prototype of whatever it is you articulated, and most of the time it's not very attractive, honestly. And then for somebody that's not competent, like a competent designer, they could sit there and just like articulate the changes they want it to make. And the only thing that I would say is different in my workflow versus probably other people's is I'll use an MCP to link it to Figma, which will then allow me to like export the screens into Figma. I can make them look beautiful and like how I want them to be, make any adjustments I want. And then I can feed those back into the model and it will update it for me. So like if you, yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I'd say is like the model is fantastic, but then whatever your superpower is that you can layer in over the top of it is like makes a huge difference. So if you're an engineer and you're just super competent in back-end engineering, like you'll be able to notice when it's going a little bit off track. For me, obviously, as a designer, like I can have it build a prototype. It may not be as like beautiful code as like an engineer might have, but then I can make the user interface gorgeous. And so obviously you're letting the model make up for the things that you're not competent at, and then applying your competence where you can. I think that's it. That's all I had for you, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's really good. I feel like I definitely have a better mental map now, kind of understand several parts of it.
I think
now it's probably get in there and start playing with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, get in there and start playing. And if there's a next step for this conversation, it's like maybe do come around and we'll try and build something on the fly. Like if you feel like you're getting stuck and like you're not understanding it, we'll just try and build something together. And then It might take, an hour or two, but we can basically, I can just show you what I do. And believe me, it's nothing crazy. It's just getting in there and figuring it out. It's like, it's all kind of baby steps, and then the picture starts to come together.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to get into that this week and start playing with it at work.
Sweet. Well, let me know how it goes, and if any other questions come up, hit me up.
All right. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate it.
No worries, dude. Have a great day.
You too.
Ciao.